I had to catch up with Prof before he leaves Ghana here. He's been somebody that has inspired my journey. When we talk about Pan-Africanism, when we talk about somebody that's trying to change our mindset, how we think about ourselves, he is one of them. I love his quotes. One of his quotes, he said, "You shouldn't hit a mosquito with a hammer."
Indeed.
When you say that quote, what does that mean, Prof?
The essence of life is that things must be done in a proportionate manner, so that if you respond to any situation, you've got to analyze what the appropriate response is, and in that way you get the best dividends. But if you respond in a disproportionate manner, then you don't get the dividends. In fact, what you may get is destruction. That is why you don't respond to a mosquito bite with a hammer, or some would say a sledgehammer. Okay. Yes.
Prof, one of the things that you also said was that fasting and prayer is not going to work in all situations, but we have to act, we have to pull up our sleeves and get to work.
No, there is nothing with fasting and praying, depending on which religious persuasion one is in. But that in and of itself cannot solve the problems. God has given us the intellect, the ability to achieve what it is that we desire. And we have seen it happen in this continent. Before we were disrupted, there is now evidence that we attained amazing technological feats. Here in Ghana or in Benin or in Ethiopia, Africans did amazing things. And we see other civilizations doing those amazing things. And what we are telling our people is, let us roll up our sleeves and engage in the business of invention and innovation. We can pray all we want, and there is nothing wrong with it. But if we believe that out of prayer, without any effort on our part, all our problems will be solved or resolved, then we are deluding ourselves.
Do you think that somehow religion is holding us back a little as Africans?
Without doubt. Remember, the dominant religions have been midwife to the continent of Africa from other continents. And you and me will remember that Christianity, as was midwife to us, was midwifed in a manner that was designed to subdue us. I remember in one of the early statements of Kwame Nkrumah, he said that when the colonialists came, they came with the administrators, they came with the anthropologists, they came with the missionaries who told us, store all your treasures in heaven where there is no rust nor moth. And meanwhile, they were taking our gold. They were taking our things because they knew that the divine instruction is to use the sweat of our brow to improve the quality of our lives. And I think that the time is now that Africa must not see religion as the avenue to prosperity. Africa must see the use of our intellect as the avenue to prosperity. We've got to invent, we've got to innovate, we've got to improve our agriculture, we've got to improve the things that are going to change our lives in a positive manner in this transition from the fourth to the fifth industrial revolution. And that is happening before our very eyes. And we have no excuse. We have seen during our very lifetimes how countries such as South Korea, countries such as Vietnam now, China, Japan have transitioned from backwater countries technologically, and they are now in the highest pedestal of achievement through innovation and invention. And that is what we are telling ourselves, that the time is now for our institutions, whether they are universities, whether they are technical institutions, to get into that space of invention and innovation.
I'm glad you mentioned about China and Korea. When you look at China, they called back their diaspora. One of the things that we have been promoting as GUBA is come back home. Let's build the continent together. Do you see the diaspora coming back, and how do you see them staying? on the continent, with all of the things that the challenges that we have, the corruption, people are buying land and they're having to buy it again because it's been sold to about 10 people. How do we really get our diaspora back? Because the talent is in the West. All our top doctors, all our top lawyers, all our innovators that you're talking about are leaving and staying there. How do we get our talent back?
It is important to note that when we talk about the African diaspora, it must be seen at two levels. Level number one, the descendants of the Africans who left this continent, whose ancestors left the continent and went into the United States of America, into the Caribbean, into Latin America, in Brazil, Colombia, and all those other places. And in the last 6 years, we have also had individuals from different post-colonial African countries who went to the United Kingdom, to different parts of Europe and the United States of America. And you are right in saying that they are to be found as engineers, to be found as doctors, as lawyers, as all the professionals who have succeeded in contributing to the building of the countries which they have adopted as their own. And conservative estimates now tell us that perhaps there is no less than 300 million of Africans in the diaspora. The beauty is that African countries have now recognized that. And I see, number one, the African Union has recognized the African diaspora as the 6th region of the African continent. I've seen individual countries now rename their ministries of foreign affairs as foreign and diaspora affairs. And this is critical. It is critical because it then creates an environment that can be made enabling. And see how deliberate I am. I'm saying can be made enabling. Because thus far in many African countries, the environment has not been enabling. So that countries' representatives go to different parts of the West and wherever Africans are in the diaspora, and they tell them, come back home. And when they come back home, they discover to their chagrin that the environment is hostile for achieving the desired intention, whether it's incorporating a company, whether it's acquisition of land, whether it's obtaining licenses in different areas. And I think that the time is now for African countries to ensure that those who desire to move back into the continent have an enabling environment. If you want your engineers to abandon what they are doing in the United States of America or in Europe and wherever they are in Australia or Canada and to come to Ghana or Kenya or Tanzania, create an environment that will make them achieve what they desire to achieve. If you want your doctors to come here, do the same. And this is something that is achievable, because we have seen other civilizations do it. You were yourself in the diaspora and you made a deliberate decision to come back home. And it's not for the faint-hearted. There are so many hurdles. What is it, we must ask, that the Chinese did, that they were able to attract their young men and women to go back home? What is it that the Japanese did? What is it that the Koreans did? And can we do it? And sometimes I tell my friends in the diaspora that when we tell people to come back, it is not always the case that they'll come back and relocate physically. Yeah. It is possible to be back by dint of action. There are those who want to come back and stay and do things, but there are those who want to have a meaningful, productive presence in the countries that they choose to come to, whether it's Angola or Namibia, but in the continent of Africa. And I believe that that is urgent. And particularly now, that in the context of Africa Agenda 2063, we say that we want Africans to create a continent that is a middle-level economy. We want to create a continent which trades with ourselves under the aegis of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. This is when we need the expertise of our men and women in the diaspora most. And it is beyond rhetoric by government officials. It is by creating regimes, visa regimes, that will be accommodative, eliminating visa regimes, not by dint of rhetoric, but by dint of creating an environment that is truly facilitative and enabling. What are we going to do? First of all, we've got to look at our policy formulation. What kind of policies do we have in place that is going to give birth to a legal regime that is going to facilitate, and on the ground, have we sensitized our public officials so that when people come, they are received in a manner that will help them to integrate into the system? Because the other thing that one does not want is to create an environment where those in the diaspora come back and they live in a bubble and they attract enmity from the indigents whom they find at home. This is the approach that, in my view, we should work towards. And it has been done before, so we'll not, as the cliche goes, be reinventing the wheel.
Prof, when you look at countries like Canada, the US, the UK, I live very close to the Canadian embassy. Every day I see thousands of Ghanaians huggled up trying to get a visa. Canada is saying, I want the best students. They're basically taking the best of our best. How do we stop that?
You know, it is easier said than done that you must be patriotic. And this is what your typical African politician does, to say, be patriotic, serve your country. But how can you serve your country when you are qualified as a doctor and the statistics say that you need 100 doctors but you can't get employment for 5 years? We need engineers, but an engineer is not employed for 6 years. You need agriculturists, but you are importing goods from Brazil, importing chicken from Brazil. We are not going to stem the flood until we do something in the domestic arena. And it's not only Canada that is doing it. The Europeans now, the Germans are saying we need 500,000 nurses. And they are coming to Africa to take the complete product. The Russians have just announced that they are going to create a visa regime that is going to allow people from different parts of Africa to go to Russia. Perhaps it is the cold that is going to stop people from going to Russia. But it is going to continue as long as the domestic environment does not allow people to thrive. Because Canada is telling our young men and women, come. If you are a doctor, we are going to create an environment that allows you to fulfill yourself professionally, and we are going to pay you a wage that enables you to live in a decent manner. If you are an engineer, we are going to do that with you. If you are an economist, we are going to do that with you. If you are an IT expert, we are going to do that with you. But in our respective domestic arenas, in our 54, 55 odd African countries, the environment is becoming toxic by the day. The opportunities are shrinking by the day. If you look at the things that you need as critical ingredients in industrialization, we are not working to achieve them. Power generation. How are you going to industrialize when the electricity you generate is 5,000 megawatts, while that of South Korea is nearly 100,000 megawatts, while that of places like Canada with a small population is bigger than that of the entire continent of Africa? So you are going to continue to see our young men and women being humiliated at the embassies of European countries and America and Australia and in increasingly Eastern Europe, as long as we don't do something about it. What should we do about it? What we should do about it is that we should bring pressure to bear on African governments and African politicians and bureaucrats to recognize that you cannot grow if you don't have high quality, highly trained labor. Retain your best men and women within the continent, because it is by their retention that you are going to unlock the doors that need to be unlocked. And this is where the diaspora comes in. The diaspora comes in with the expertise, and the diaspora now has the muscle and the wherewithal to compel governments to behave decently. Look at a little country like Israel. If you look at the patents that are registered in Israel through their universities, is much bigger than the entire African continent combined, because the Jewish diaspora, like them or hate them, whether they are in the United States of America or in South Africa or wherever they are, their true economic north is Tel Aviv or Jerusalem, whichever capital you choose to recognize. But is that true of a Ghanaian in the diaspora, true of a Nigerian in the diaspora, of a Kenyan in the diaspora, of a Zimbabwean in the diaspora? Typically, most people in the diaspora, and even those who are at home, when their children are leaving the continent, they tell them, my son, go ye and never come back. When they come back, it's simply for sentimental and romantic reasons. We want to rise above romanticism and above sentimentalism by engaging our continent in production, in agriculture. When we talk about engaging Africans in production, we mean all sectors. Look at agriculture. Look at the technology that we have in the area of agriculture. Do we engage in agriculture in a manner that is going to ensure that we feed our people across the continent? Look at the dividends of artificial intelligence now. Are we participating in that space in a manner that is going to revolutionize our affairs? Look at communication. Look at engineering. We are now talking about nanotechnology. We are talking about these areas, and the question that we must ask ourselves, even in our universities, are we attracting the kind of men and women who are going to place on the path of research and development? We are not. And that is once again where the diaspora comes in. If look at the people in different parts of Europe and America and in Asia who are engaged in research, but that kind of research does not find its way to the continent of Africa. And I'm talking about the whole idea of having our institutions of higher learning benefiting from the accumulated knowledge that we now have in the diaspora. And this is critical and urgent, because the world is not in the business of waiting. The world is in the business of doing. And this is where the road meets the rubber. And the road in this regard is the policy environment which must be created in the continent of Africa. And the rubber in this regard is the expertise that we have in the diaspora, which will then be combined with the expertise we have domestically. And if we get traction, then I'm telling you, within 30 years maximum, Africa will be in the same space that we see the Koreas. And we don't talk about the Arab countries. During my lifetime, I've seen the Arab countries use the same resource that is to be found in Nigeria, that is to be found in Angola, that is to be found in Mozambique, oil and gas, to catapult themselves into a different orbit. And what have they done? Is to attract labor. They have attracted, the Qataris have attracted labor, the Bahrainis have attracted labor, the Emiratis have attracted labor, the Kuwaitis have attracted labor, the Omanis have attracted labor, and our labor is out there in the diaspora. And they are saying, we want to come back home. But is home welcoming? Is home facilitating? Is home prepared to give them the hand that they need in order to realize their potential? Is home a place that they want to be in the long haul? This is the task that you and me, because we have blamed people and other things for too long, but for how long shall we blame other people? The time is now for us to say, well, it has not been good, but we can do it.
Absolutely, I believe we can. One of the quotes that you also mentioned was, third world is a state of mind.
Yes.
Can you elaborate on that?
If you look at the critical meaning when I say that third world is a state of mind, you remember this creation of first, second, and third world. These were terminologies that have been used by Western Europe particularly to describe the economic development of other countries. Remember, at one time we were third world, then at one time we were underdeveloped, then at one time we were developing, and we accepted that state. And when I say there is a state of mind, it means that it is in the mind that things must change. Look at the Japanese when they got into the motor vehicle industry. Look at the Koreans when they went into mobile telephony. What happened? They simply said, we are going to do things differently. And they told their universities, we want you to engage in research, and we are going to invest in research and development, and we are going to patent. Today, if you look at their presence in those spaces, it's because they changed their mind. But have we changed our minds? If you look at your typical African university, do we have investment in research? Are they enabled by their government? Is there an interaction between universities and private sector in a manner that gives birth to patenting and innovation and invention? There is not. And I'm saying that that change of mind, the change of mind that tells you that you are not a lesser being, that you are capable of achieving what human beings can and have achieved, is what is going to turn everything upside down and make us achieve what we ought to achieve. Look at countries like Singapore. What do they have? Nothing. Look at Malaysia. What do they have that we don't have? Look at Vietnam after the war in 1975 is now going into a totally different space of industrialization. Nigeria should be in that space. Ghana should be in that space if you had continued on the trajectory that was put forth by Kwame Nkrumah with Energy, Akosombo, and Tema and all. Kenya should be in that space. And many other African countries should be in that space where the Singapores and the Malaysias of this world are, and the South Koreas. We were economic partners in the 1960s, and they made the right decisions. We must make those decisions, and we must implement them, and they must be time-bound. We have entered into enough treaties. We have signed enough accords. We have made enough declaration. Let us now declare that for the next 10 years, we are going to engage with a view to producing, and producing in a measurable way. And this is where the diaspora comes in. That worldview, that nothing is unachievable, is what we need in order to achieve.
One of the other things that you've spoken about in the past is the fact that there's young women out there that don't have sanitary pads, but government officials have V8s, they have iPads, they have all of these things. It's misplaced priorities.
I spoke metaphorically, but addressing a reality that we live in a continent where the political class enjoy things that are enjoyed by any political class in the most developed of the countries, and yet their citizens cannot even have access to the basics. And my message was, let us cut our coat according to our size. Let us deal with the basics. Let us not be leaders of a people who are deprived and humiliated and cannot afford basic things. And I think it is Tanzania's Julius Nyerere who said it so very effectively and passionately. Development must be understood contextually. The Americans may characterize development as landing on the moon. For our purpose, we'll characterize development as our ability to supply potable water to our villages. And once we do that and you supply the basics to the population, then you can enjoy the dividends that come with production in your environment. The tragedy is, in many African countries, the political class want to live the lives of millionaires while their population is in poverty of unmatched proportions. the time is for us to change. And Chinua Achebe once said, when you read his book, Antilles of the Savannah, he said, "I do not know from what inexhaustible wells of patience the African draws. His or our leaders constantly abuse them, but somehow they are attracted to the same leaders who abuse them. In other words, it would be called the Stockholm Syndrome, where the captured loves the captor."
Last question. Is there unity amongst us black people? If not, why, and will we ever be unified?
You know, the word unity is a word that I want to be applied very deliberately and contextually. What do we unite for? Even thieves can unite. Even murderers can unite. Unity is not about thinking in a similar fashion at all times. Unity is about exploiting our diversity in a manner that allows us to exploit our strengths. So we should be unified for something or some things. As long as we are human beings with different intellects, we'll always have different perspectives on different things. But the most important thing is that we must unite to achieve economic dividends. We must unite to create an environment that will enable the continent of Africa to thrive. We must unite for positive things. There is a book written by Professor Ali Mazrui. The title is The Power of Babel. All of us are used to the Tower of Babel as being the metaphor for division and the dominance of centrifugal forces. But Ali Mazrui says there is power in Babel. You come with an idea which I do not have. I come with an idea which you do not have. You come with an attribute which I do not have, and I come with an attribute that you do not have, and we combine them, and lo and behold, we create something that is powerful. How can we use Ghana's cocoa for the benefit of the continent of Africa? How can we use Nigerian oil for the benefit of Africa? How can we use the lithium in the Democratic Republic of Congo for the benefit of Africa? How can we use coltan or uranium from Niger for the benefit of Africa? It is that kind of unity that we should be talking about, pulling in the same direction for the purpose of realizing things that are for the general good. In other words, as one would say it, you need different players playing different instruments to create an orchestra.
Love that. And I think that's ended it so well. And one of the things that you have mentioned throughout this interview is the time is now.
The Chinese leader Mao Zedong once said, "To do all the things that we desire to do, we need 10,000 years. We don't have 10,000 years. Act now and play your part."
Act now, play your part. Thank you so much for watching.